trying to get everything to line up here. Rotten thing. Here's the fun and games, fixing things. Music and stuff has sort of been a part of my life from year dot. My actual father was an artist, but then he departed the scene fairly soon afterwards for various reasons, obviously between my mother and he, but we actually ended up coming to Australia from New Zealand in the early 60s, and where my mother ended up meeting an English man who was a folk singer. He was involved with the Seekers and various other things. In fact, in his own right, I suppose he was, considered up there as well. He used to sing with the Melbourne New Orleans Jazz Band, and went on a tour with them through Europe and so on. And so that was our exposure to music and so on. So I grew up with all of this kind of lots of different music in my life, really, and that sort of got me into playing a bit of music. And I ended up in a band when I was about 17, I guess, and probably I wasn't even old enough to drink in New Zealand in those days, because the licence stage I think was 20 in those days. So I sort of here was I playing in a nightclub till the wee hours. Rather interesting times. But as a consequence to that, when I came to Australia, I got tired of being a poor musician, and ended up having to try and do some different things. And as a consequence to that, I had some friends that also come over as musicians who ended up segueing from being musicians into sound engineers. And this was probably in the early 80s. And it was, I don't know, I used to do it on the weekends, go out, give the boys a hand, and found I was quite good at it. So I sort of ended up developing a career as a sound engineer, and I ended up being quite good at it, and work kept flowing. And but I'm a fairly practical person, and working as a sound engineer in those days was more of a lifestyle choice as much as it was about making money. Consequently, there's lots of very poor, starving kind of sound engineers who have just fallen along the wayside, because there was no such thing as a retirement or superannuation or any of those other things. But I was a bit more practical, and sort of looked for other alternatives, and got involved in running a hire company with a guy who gave me an opportunity then to build up a small hire company. And as a result of that, I found some of our costs were involved in fixing things and designing things, crossovers and so on. And I'd always had an interest in electronics, I suppose, right from school in those days, but never really had an opportunity to develop it. In those days, you had to have a piece of paper to be able to go on and actually study those kinds of things. And I left school when I was 14. Didn't stop me doing anything. It's just like anything else, you've got to apply yourself. But anyway, the opportunity came down, and I thought, oh well, okay, I'll do some formal study. So while I was running the hire company, I'd come home after a gig at 4 o'clock in the morning and do a few hours of study in electronics. Gradually, over a period of time, I qualified. Not that I was aiming at anything in particular, but gradually, I saw an opportunity to start a business doing electronic repairs. I was fairly good at it, enjoyed it, and saw it as a future. It's a slow process, build things up, learning things. So, even now, after sort of something like 25, 26 years, I'm still learning new things, particularly with the digital age and amplifiers, switching power supplies and all those sorts of things, which are all fun and games, sent to tease our brains, I suppose. It's quite a challenge at times. So I remember some years ago, This is the thing about how gung-ho people are in this industry sometimes, you know. You go out there and you sort of think you're Superman, and this particular guy on the top of a PA stack at a gig, and you know, thinking he's going to move everything else on his own, and ends up taking a total gutser off the back of the thing, and the box fell down and fell on him, you know, without thinking. You know, he's just sort of one of those things you have to be aware of when you're doing these kinds of things. You just can't do it on your own sometimes. You know, so you know, there's a reason for OH&S, although I can't exactly think of it at the moment. You know, OHS is a real pain in the backside in some respects, but at the end of the day, you know, there is reasons for it. Mainly these idiots who go off and do these kinds of things and hurt themselves, you know. So you can't be. You've got to be careful. Even in here, I work on my own in here. You know, I have a safety transformer under here, so I'm fully isolated, so that, you know, my children don't come out and find me crumpled on the floor. You've got to, you know, there's certain things you've got to do. You've got to be careful with, you know. I have a saw bench where I build speaker boxes, you know, and I have to be very careful with that for much the same reasons. You've got to pay attention to what you're doing, otherwise it's very easy to hurt yourself and hurt others. You know, you've got to be safe when you're repairing something, so that, you know, that it's safe at the end of it all. You've got to take certain actions. In this day and age, you know, somebody comes in with a poor lead on the thing, you've got to cut it off. You're obliged to, because it has to be fitted properly. Otherwise, somebody can be electrocuted. You've got to be very careful about these things. You know, I have all those public liability insurances and so on to make sure that it covers my backside in the event, you know, something slipped by me. But the point is to try and make sure that it doesn't slip by you, and that you do the right thing. Even though sometimes it's easier not to do the right thing, you've got to take care to do the right thing. It's interesting in this times how so many products from unnamed places and have this habit of, you know, you're going to have them take it out of the box brand new, plug it in, and it'll blow up on you. Usually because they have an unusual way of doing their quality control prior to actually testing the entire unit, which actually doesn't seem to occur. Which is a lot of faith in something when you're going to buy something brand new, take it out of the box, power it up in the well, I've had this happen actually. You power it up and suddenly the place is full of smoke because one of the main filter caps has been put in back to front. So you actually ask yourself whether any quality control has been done at all, because, you know, if you'd done that and powered it up when you were actually testing it, well, it would have done that same thing right then. So therefore, it has never been powered up. So, you know, to say that quality testing has occurred is actually a bit of a furphy. And that's the kind of thing that happens. The drive to being the cheapest product you can be comes at a cost, which you don't is not immediately realisable, unless, of course, you proceed to be the unfortunate person to actually take this new product, power it up, and have it blow up in front of you. A bit unfortunate, but that's the way it is these days. Anything that's cheap will usually have a cost of one kind or another. So therefore, you know, the argument would be go and buy something that has actually got a bit more of a track record, if you like. People come and ask me from time to time what I would recommend, and it's sort of difficult to recommend things. People want to buy things cheaply all the time, and you know, once again, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So if you want something that's actually going to be reliable, you've got to spend some money to do so. One of the things that has sort of, you know, gradually come about here is because, which is what I've been looking at over a period of time, was to start developing something of my own. I've started playing with the ideas, and you know, one of which sort of led to building an experimental amplifier, which based on, to some degrees, ideas that I've picked up along the way. You know, when I repair amplifiers, you kind of get to see the shortcomings and sometimes the benefits of doing certain things. So you sort of take ideas from that and try to develop something of your own that brings your own colour to it. And I built up a little self-biased amplifier of 30 watts using some of these ideas and these preamp shaping and so on, because, you know, tone is developed by preamp. So I built up a little thing, and there's a local guy came up and brought in this American boutique amplifier, which had cost him, you know, quite a bit. but it had a problem, and I duly fixed it. But at the end of it, when the customer came back to pick it up, asked me, well, what did I think of it? And I said, well, yeah, okay, but how about trying one of these? This is my little beast that I've currently got. And so he did, and instantly fell in love with it, which was very flattering. And came back a number of days later and paid me cash for it. And I thought, well, that was very nice too. So that was my first, I think, sale that went then, based on some of the ideas that I've got. I mean, I enjoy doing those kinds of things and would like to continue doing that. But at the end of the day, I could build anything for anyone. It's just simply a matter of taking a circuit and building it. I've had other chap in Deniliquin. I've built several things for. Wanted a Fender Champ in an old radio console. A bit of a challenge. I had to redo a chassis that actually fitted inside the thing and fit everything in and make it work. But it did, using the original speakers, so it actually didn't sound too bad. And a couple of other things I built for him as well, similar types of things. The chap would come in, he'd been one of these guys who gets on the internet, and somebody, there's always people out there say, oh, well, there's ways of making things sound better. Well, arguable. But, this idea of modifying existing things, sometimes it can be of benefit. At the end of the day, you can build anything. You don't have to go back and have to buy the original thing and spend squillions doing something that's going to end up having to be serviced all the time. If you can build something that has the same characteristic, but it's brand new with all new components and so on, I think there'd be something to be said for it.